The antagonism between the people and the police has never truly disappeared. Today, amid rising populism and geopolitical intention, the role of the police has become increasingly politicalized and radicalized. From the O.J. Simpson case in 1990s America to the George Floyd incident and the Henry Nowak case, all those reveal a pattern. Western police and judicial system keep making erroneous judgments, trapping in endless debate and protests over race, minority, and religions. It seems that Western policing has fallen into a whirlpool of the political madness, bending evidence, science, and fact-based investigation and verdicts. In this chaos, you see Western media constantly blaming each other, locked into left versus right battle. But in my view, it's completely wrong way to see it. Fortunately, my background as a Chinese person allows me to analyze, from a relatively neutral and materialist perspective, how Western policing system ends out like this. In this video, I will explain from Chinese viewpoint how the UK-US police system gradually shifting from serving the public to serving political demands and political correctness, and most importantly, I will compare the fundamental difference between police systems under Western capitalism and Chinese police system. Why under Western capitalism, the police serve minority interest groups, while in China, the police serve the general public. I'm a Chinese citizen who once studied in the UK. I will interpret Western political phenomena through Chinese perspective. If you are interested in how Chinese people see the West, or you want to know more about Chinese people's culture, please subscribe, like, or leave a comment. It helps the algorithm recommend my content. The term white left is used by Chinese netizens to describe the extreme left-leaning white people in the West.
And the challenges facing the United States in human rights are deep-seated. They did not just emerge over the past 4 years, such as Black Lives Matter. It did not come up only recently.
So there you have the Chinese government using Black Lives Matter as a weapon against the United States. You have the Chinese lecturing us about human rights. Woo! You never thought you'd see the day that happened. But the amazing thing is, in 2021, it works. That's why they do it. The Chinese know our leaders very well. In fact, they have a name for our self-hating professional class. They call them Baisaw. The rough translation from the Mandarin is white liberal, and it is definitely not a compliment. Here's how Chinese state media describe Baisaw. Quote, they're people who only care about topics such as immigration, minorities, LGBT, and the environment, who have no sense of real problems in the real world, who only advocate for peace and equality to satisfy their own feelings of moral superiority, and who are so obsessed with political correctness that they tolerate backward Islamic values for the sake of multiculturalism. As Chinese state media notes, quote, former U.S. President Obama was considered an advocate of Baisaw ideology. So was German Chancellor Angela Merkel in her decision to welcome more than 1 million third world immigrants to Europe, end quote. Other observations about Baisaw, as reported by Chinese state media, include the fact that they, quote, advocate inclusiveness and anti-discrimination, but cannot tolerate different opinions. Baisaw's political opinions are, quote, so shallow that they tend to maintain social equality by embracing ideologies that run against the basic concept of equality. Amazing. Woo! According to one scholar from Peking University, Baisaw are phony and hypocritical and will make the situation in the West go from bad to worse, and so on. Talk about insightful. They know our leaders well. According to Wikipedia, many Chinese internet users use the term Baisaw, and we're quoting, to criticize the Democratic Party's emphasis on affirmative action policies, which are perceived as discriminating against Asians, end quote. So whatever you think of the Chinese, they're definitely not stupid, and they're onto something here. Affirmative action hurts Asians. That is true, and everyone knows it. A study of Harvard's admissions policies, for example, found that if the school admitted students solely on merit, as we thought they did, the percentage of Asian students in a given class would double to 43%. Now, Harvard doesn't want that many Asians. So it denies admissions to Asians because they're Asian. That is the definition of discrimination. That's what racism is.
As neoliberalism enters school, education system, and police system, Western authorities became obsessed with political correctness. Very few of those in power are truly fools. So what is the real purpose behind their relentlessly push the DEI and various political correctness measures? In the 1990s, Western political systems were full of racial discrimination and violent law enforcement. The O.J. Simpson case being primary example because a detective personally used the N-word. The jury and the police were distracted by racial issues, ignoring the physical evidence and rational thinking. With the rise of the neoliberal worldview, Western workplace began promoting an anti-discrimination and DEI culture. Police officers are trained that in many allegations of the racial profiling, the world of the person of the color must be prioritized. Officers from minority backgrounds are actively encouraged to be promoted and pointed to specialist positions. This might sound positive, but it ignores the human nature. Many exploited this loophole, as we saw the Henry Nowak case. On religion's issue, the white left has used religion freedom as an excuse. For example, allowing people to carry a knife in public. Over decades ago, Tibet people in China could also carry Tibet knife for religion reasons. But as China modernized and secularized, our ideology based on material development has been promoted. That's why the past 30 years, China has focused on public infrastructure, healthcare, technology, and not on religion. Of course, while criticize the white left, it doesn't mean I endorse the far right. Moreover, I personally think that Western policy allowing people to carry knives in the public space under excuse of religion is utterly foolish. Can I bring a gun or expose it into a public space for religion reasons? Let's be clear, if you are in an environment where people has a knife but you don't, you are in danger. Conversely, if you are the only one with a knife, you are the dangerous. As a Chinese Gen Z, I had never understood why such a simple logic remains endless debate in the West, when the fruits of the globalized wealth have not benefited everyone. When social wealth is centralized in the hands of the few elites, while the middle class feels stagnated and anxiety, the great illusion of liberalism is the belief that one can be responsible for oneself while assuming others will be responsible for themselves. This has led to the liberalism retreat, trading fairness, justice, equality, and the rule of the law for the invention of the pre-modern religions. Religions, once at the table, cares nothing but fairness or equality. Liberalism lacks of the violent spirit of the rule of the law, and the demands of the small government further weakens law enforcement. A liberalism that cannot be implemented while only wandering around the edge of the history, until the day everybody truly takes responsibility for their own actions. English-speaking countries turn towards two-party system. Winner takes all, so the left-right divide is severe. In Sweden, after the current government took office, immigration policies were tightened significantly, penalty increased, and many undocumented immigrants were sent back. Recently, there has been talk about stripping even naturalized citizens of their own nationality if they commit serious crime, like relate drug trafficking, and send them back to their country of origin. Meanwhile, right-wing media focus on the immigrant identity of the perpetrator. But if you take a look at the victim's surname, Nowak, you will find out it's Polish. In other words, he too had an immigrant background. 30 years ago, the surname would be also have been discriminated against by the white Britons. To be honest, Henry Nowak was murdered, and the officers who failed him was competent. But the British Emperor, with its global colonialism, the sun never setting, is the reason why so many immigrants came from India and Pakistan. For a country that fought 2 opium war with China, I would say it's never surprised me. The white right partisan were ethic and tradition that you prize were themselves the driving force behind Britain's colonial explanation. Why don't Poland and Hungary had those problems? Because they never engaged with such a shameful colonial activities. They had no guilt, and their people were never upset massive immigration.
How many refugees has Poland taken?
0.
And you're proud of that?
If you are asking me, if you're asking me about Muslims illegal immigration, none, not even one will come to Poland. Not even one if it's illegal. We took over 2 million Ukrainians who are working, who are peaceful in Poland. We will not receive even one Muslim because this is what we promised.
But I asked
This
not
quota
about
system
illegal
failed.
immigrants, I asked about refugees. And Jean-Claude Juncker, the Commission President, says that you're racist. You sound proud of the fact that you haven't taken any refugees.
Of course, because this is what our people are expecting from our government. That's number one. This is why our government was elected. But this is why Poland is so safe. This is the reason why we had not even one terrorist attack. Look at the streets in Poland, and we can be called populists, nationalists, racists. I don't care. I care about my family and about my country.
I believe that as long as we understand that people and nations are truly equal, there's nothing wrong with being proud of their own ethnicity. But today's deepest contradiction is economic inequality. The gap between the rich and the poor is terrifying. Capitalism has no nation, while depending internal contradiction within their own nations. They incite hatred and disgust towards other ethnicities, basically putting the poor against the poor. You may happily think you share a nation with the super rich, but in reality, they don't see you as the ally. They will exploit you just the same. Those in power has skillfully divided public anger away from questioning wealth inequality towards the cultural battlefield of identity, race, and gender. Big capitalism doesn't care whether you are pure-blooded anything. They use ethnic narratives and diversity to cover class narratives, using so-called brotherly love for political deals and to attract immigrants to expand their voter base. Any ordinary people can see that something so bizarre harms national governments, but the elites knows it. But why should they care if the nation suffers? Their personal capital is not tied to the nation. Maintaining the countries and its people does not affect them personally. They are willing to sacrifice something stability to stay in power. All those things are just their covers. DEI was proposed in the saying of the fairness, but it has harmed fairness itself. Because the people who designed this superstructure never intended fairness. The fact that those covers can be pushed forward and sweep up so many ignorant people into fighting each other proves that the power of the dirty players is unimaginably strong. They can change everything quietly and imperceptibly until everyone forgets that they are the one pulling the strings behind the scenes. Becoming a police officer in China is very difficult and strict. You need to take the world's biggest competitive college entrance exam, the Gaokao, to get the police academy. You also must pass a series test and assessments, and upon graduation, pass the national police examinations. In addition, the background check is extremely strict 3 generations of your family must have no criminal records. Those measures greatly differentiate the quality of the police officer, especially compared to the US, where you only need a high school diploma and something training to carry a gun on duty. This largely explains the problem of Western police abusing power, no systematic vetting or competitive rigor. Of course, I believe the vast majority of the police officers uphold the law, and many even sacrifice their lives. But I still have to say, the problem within Western police system have not disappeared over time. Policing seems to have shifted from evidential-based investigation to endless pursuit of political correctness, emotions, and left-right confrontations, especially with large-scale immigration into the West, particularly from the third world countries with no background checks. The already ineffective, underfunded, and bloated police system are becoming even less functional. That's why many EU residents feel in their daily lives their country are becoming more dangerous. As China continues to modernize and invest taxpayer money in infrastructure and public service, automation and robots has begun pilot programs in first-tier cities like Shenzhen. This will help reduce the workload and pressure on frontline police officers, who currently work 12 hours and more per shift on average. In contrast, the Western police system functions more like a service pursued by the wealth. High-value neighborhoods are safe, more patrols, higher police presence, poor neighbors are left behind. The logic has never been reformed, updated, or changed. That's why so many people say China is living in the future, but actually China is living in the present, while Western policing remains stuck in the past.